During a decisive international event, Lula took the stage to harshly criticize Donald Trump's climate and populist policies. The former U.S. president, known for his impulsiveness, reacted unexpectedly live. Behind the scenes, it was revealed that the confrontation had been brewing in the corridors of power. The tension between the two leaders became a global headline, provoking diplomatic reactions, ideological clashes, and a behind-the-scenes battle. The event had been awaited for months. The Global Climate Summit, held in Geneva, was set to bring together world leaders to discuss humanity's future amid the environmental crisis. The auditorium was packed with journalists, diplomats, and heads of state. Among them, two figures stood out: Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, President of Brazil, and Donald Trump, the former President of the United States, who, even out of office, had secured a prominent place as a global right-wing figure. Lula arrived smiling, flanked by ministers and environmental advisors. His speech would be one of the first of the morning, and he had prepared sharp words against climate change denial, indirectly targeting figures like Trump. Behind the scenes, advisors commented that Lula was determined to send a message. We cannot allow leaders who deny science to have a voice on the world stage, he told a European diplomat just before taking the stage. When Lula began speaking, the room fell silent. He praised multilateral efforts, defended the Amazon, and criticized rich countries for their ecological hypocrisy. But the climax came in the final minutes, when, without naming names, he directly attacked Trump's legacy. There are those who destroyed agreements, mocked the UN, and now pose as the counselors of the free world. Humanity cannot be led by fanatics. Trump, who was watching from the front row beside Republican representatives, couldn't hide his irritation. He crossed his arms, frowned, and whispered something to an advisor. One of the nearby microphones picked up the phrase, "If he wants war, he'll get it. This guy has never impressed me." And it was in this tense atmosphere that the conference took another turn. Minutes after Lula's speech, social media was already buzzing. International news channels highlighted the indirect criticisms of reactionary populism and disregard for science. Although Lula hadn't mentioned Trump by name, analysts had no doubt the provocation was clear. Behind the scenes of the summit, American advisors scrambled to prepare a response. Trump, with his characteristic style, didn't wait for the protocol. He demanded to take the stage ahead of schedule. Organizers were caught off guard, but didn't dare stop him. In the backstage area, he made a quick call to Steve Bannon, his former strategist. He poked the bear. Now he'll see what it's like to be exposed in public, he said in a threatening tone. In the press room, journalists were already speculating about a possible bombshell response. Beside Trump, two Republican senators prepared charts that downplayed the role of the Amazon in global climate regulation, a clear attempt to discredit Brazil in the international community. For Trump, it wasn't just about environmental politics. It was an ego battle. The tension in the air was palpable. While Lula met with European leaders, Trump approached the stage with the confidence of someone who knew how to make an impact. He wouldn't forgive the veiled humiliation, and the world was about to witness a verbal clash between two of the most controversial politicians of the century. When Trump took the microphone, the audience fell into absolute silence. He dismissed his prepared speech and began to improvise in the style that had made him a hit with his supporters. They're trying to teach the world about the environment. Those who can't even control their own forests, he shot, in an aggressive tone that elicited uncomfortable reactions from parts of the audience. Without naming Lula, but clearly referring to him, Trump continued, "There are those who like to point fingers at others while living in alliance with dictatorships that destroy the planet. Hypocrisy is running wild in Geneva." Every phrase was designed to provoke, and it succeeded. Brazilian diplomats, shocked, immediately alerted the foreign ministry. Lula's team, watching the speech in a private room, exchanged tense glances. The Minister of Foreign Affairs asked if Lula wanted to respond immediately. But the president remained calm. Let him speak. When we respond, it will be with facts, not a circus show, Lula said. Visibly irritated, but composed. At the end of the speech, Trump still delivered a final jab. The world needs real leadership, not populist speeches in Portuguese. When leaving the stage, journalists rushed to capture his words. The war of narratives was officially on. The Lula versus Trump clash became a global headline. CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera, Le Monde. Everyone highlighted the confrontation between the Brazilian progressive and the American right-wing icon. On social media, hashtags like hashtag Lula vs Trump and hashtag CLIMASEM show, Climate Without Show, skyrocketed to the trending topics in minutes. Influencers and political analysts were divided between criticism and support. In Brazil, Trump's comments caused outrage. Government lawmakers took to the floor to defend the president. It's unacceptable for a foreign ex-president to insult our head of state on international soil, declared a PT, Workers' Party deputy. Meanwhile, opposition politicians seized the moment to attack Lula. He started it, said a post from a Bolsonaro-supporting senator. In the U.S., conservative channels praised Trump's stance. Fox News highlighted that he put Lula in his place. Meanwhile, more liberal outlets criticized the former president's behavior, calling his attitude childish and belligerent. The polarization crossed borders. Meanwhile, the conference organizers tried to calm the diplomatic crisis. There was a risk that the event, which had been designed to build global consensus, would turn into a political battleground. But the protagonists seemed determined to take it to the limit. Back at the hotel in Geneva, Lula gathered his team to discuss the response. Some ministers suggested a press conference with data on reforestation and Brazil's environmental policies. Others wanted Lula to make a new hard-hitting speech, rebutting Trump's comments point by point. But the president remained silent, thoughtful. He wants me to play his game. But I won't fall into this trap so easily, Lula said, reviewing newspaper clippings with his special advisor. However, internally, the discomfort was evident. Brazil's image abroad was at stake, and an excessive silence could seem like weakness. On the other hand, Trump was capitalizing on the confrontation. In an interview with a Swiss channel, he said, "Weak leaders get offended by the truth. The Amazon is in danger because of the Brazilians themselves, and they want to blame us?" The phrase triggered another wave of reactions from NGOs and environmentalists alike. In Brazil, the pressure was mounting. Activists demanded a stronger response from Lula. "We can't let this slide," wrote an influencer linked to the indigenous movement. Lula knew he had to act, but with strategy. And his response would come soon, where no one expected it. The next day, while Trump was giving inflammatory interviews and provoking journalists, Lula surprised everyone. He published an open letter to the world, in 7 languages, in major international newspapers: The New York Times, El País, Le Monde, and The Guardian. The text began with a direct tone. Climate policy cannot be guided by vanity or resentment. Lula didn't mention Trump by name, but he rebutted point by point the criticisms made. He presented official data, acknowledged the challenges Brazil faced, and called for historical responsibility from the nations that polluted the most. The move was received as both elegant and impactful. European leaders praised his posture. Trump, as expected, reacted the way everyone knew he would. He attacked on X, formerly Twitter. Lula should be more concerned about corruption in Brazil than the climate. He's trying to look important, but no one takes him seriously outside his socialist bubble. The post went viral and reignited the flames of the dispute. However, the open letter had the desired effect. It repositioned Lula in the debate, moving him away from the ring of insults and placing him back as a statesman. But the truce was only apparent because Trump hadn't said his last word. 2 days later, a leaked video caused a diplomatic earthquake. Recorded by one of Trump's advisors behind the scenes of the summit, the footage showed the former U.S. president mocking Lula's accent and calling Brazil a banana republic with a forest. The recording, made without Trump's knowledge, was shared by a Swiss environmental activist. The fallout was immediate. Brazilian celebrities, international environmentalists, and even leaders from African countries spoke out against Trump's racist and offensive tone. The UN issued a statement condemning remarks that attack the dignity of peoples and nations. Lula, when questioned by journalists, was brief. "I'm not surprised. When hatred is the foundation of politics, this is what you get. But Brazil is bigger than this kind of provocation." It was a cold, calculated message exactly as his advisors had suggested. In the United States, Trump's team tried to downplay the damage, saying the video had been edited out of context. But the damage was already done. For the first time since the beginning of the summit, the former president found himself on the defensive. The Brazilian Foreign Ministry filed a formal request for a public apology from the American delegation. Although Trump held no official position at the time, his presence at the summit as a prominent guest still carried diplomatic responsibility. The document demanded clarification and a public apology for the offensive remarks towards the Brazilian people. The White House, pressured by international leaders, released a neutral statement asserting that the opinions of former presidents do not represent the current position of the United States. But behind the scenes, American diplomats admitted to discomfort with the situation. Trump refused to apologize. In a new video posted on social media, he declared, "I stand by everything I said. If they're offended, maybe it's because it's the truth." The comment heightened the tension and sparked protests from Brazilian demonstrators outside the hotel where he was staying. Meanwhile, Lula gained points with global public opinion for not stooping to Trump's level. His balanced posture, combined with firm and data-backed responses, began to pay off. But the crisis was far from over. Amid the diplomatic chaos, an unexpected name emerged to help calm the situation: Barack Obama, the former U.S. president. A personal friend of Lula's and critic of Trump called the Brazilian president to offer support. "You're dealing with an incendiary. Keep your line, the world is watching," Obama said. The gesture gained media attention and further isolated Trump politically, even among the American elite. Some Republican leaders began to avoid public appearances with him during the event. Trump's image as an uncontrolled provocateur was gaining ground. Lula, for his part, knew how to use the moment. In a new public statement, he praised the historical ties between Brazil and the United States and avoided personalizing the attacks. It was a strategic move, isolating Trump without breaking ties with the Americans. Behind the scenes, however, there was an expectation that Trump would do something even more radical to regain control of the narrative. And he would. But this time, he would cross a dangerous line. On his last day at the summit, Trump surprised everyone by calling for an exclusive press conference. The room was packed. Without hesitation, he presented documents that, according to him, proved links between Lula's government and extremist groups in Latin America. It was a serious accusation, without clear sources, but with enormous potential for damage. Brazilian diplomats reacted immediately, calling the statement false, irresponsible, and criminal. Lula, when informed, shook his head. He's crossed the line. The legal team at the Planalto Palace activated UN representatives and threatened to sue Trump for international defamation. The atmosphere became untenable. Summit organizers hastily ended Trump's participation, fearing further scandals. By the end of the day, he left Geneva under escort, without giving any interviews. The world watched, stunned, as a climate summit transformed into a political battlefield. Lula stayed. And in his final speech, he simply said, "The planet asks for unity, not spectacle. Let each of us take home the responsibility to build, not destroy." The auditorium gave him a standing ovation. After Trump's final attack, the international community reacted with outrage. Various European leaders and UN representatives openly criticized the former American president's behavior. "Turning a climate summit into a podium for baseless theories is unacceptable," declared the French president. Trump's image was now tarnished, not only among progressives, but also among traditional allies. The Brazilian delegation, on the other hand, gained strength and support. Lula's final speech was seen as a strategic win, firm without being aggressive, and aligned with the values expected for the occasion. The international press praised Brazil's stance, an example of diplomatic maturity amidst the turmoil. Meanwhile, in Brazil, the public followed every detail. TV programs, podcasts, and newspapers echoed the confrontation, and social media became a battleground between Lula supporters and Trump's. The internal political tension was reignited, reflecting the international clash. Lula returned to Brazil stronger than when he left. Trump, on the other hand, faced a wave of criticism, especially within his own Republican Party, where moderate voices accused him of tarnishing the image of the U.S. In the days that followed, new behind-the-scenes details from the event emerged. Security reports indicated that Trump had tried to force political topics into the conference agenda, even threatening organizers with trade retaliation if his demands were not met. Internal documents revealed that he pressured allied ambassadors to back his accusations against Lula. These revelations were published by the Washington Post and quickly gained traction. Democratic lawmakers called for a formal investigation into Trump's use of diplomatic credentials, even though he was no longer in office. There was a suspicion that he had used the summit to promote himself politically and attack international opponents. In Brazil, the government doubled down on its position of no longer responding directly to the provocations, but working intensely behind the scenes. The foreign ministry was in full swing, seeking international support and containing the damage left by Trump's actions on multilateral relations. Lula, meanwhile, maintained his normal public routine. But within the Planalto, the message was clear: track Trump's every move and prepare for new attempts to destabilize. Political analysts began to see that behind Trump's explosive behavior lay a strategy to use Lula as a symbol of everything. He opposed environmentalism, progressivism, and multilateralism. The idea was to consolidate support among his U.S. voters and gain global influence among far-right leaders. Bolsonaro-supporting influencers in Brazil quickly adopted Trump's narrative, sharing distorted video clips and trying to portray Lula as a climate Marxist. Some even advocated for Brazil to withdraw from international environmental treaties, echoing Trump's rhetoric. Lula decided to act. In meetings with South American leaders, he proposed a regional climate pact, including shared goals for preservation and deforestation control. The gesture was seen as a practical and strategic response to Trump's narrative. Instead of debating, Lula was articulating, but the tension remained high. On the internet, bots and fake profiles began spreading fake news involving Lula's speech at the summit, claiming supposed offenses to the U.S. The game was getting dirtier and more global. On the weekend, a bombshell news story broke. Swiss lawyers filed a formal defamation lawsuit against Donald Trump for international defamation and incitement to xenophobia during the summit. The lawsuit had no immediate criminal implications, but it could lead to severe diplomatic consequences. The document included the video in which Trump mocked Lula's accent and referred to Brazil as a banana republic, as well as the unfounded accusations made at the press conference. NGOs, environmentalists, and legal experts from several countries signed in support of the action. Trump downplayed the lawsuit. On his social media, he mocked, "Now they want to imprison me for speaking the truth? Ridiculous." But his legal advisors warned if he returned to Europe, he could be summoned to provide clarification. The international movement against him was beginning to tighten. Lula, again, refrained from commenting directly. But sources close to him said that he was pleased with the civilized world's institutional response. For the Brazilian president, the important thing was that the truth prevailed even if slowly. The tension between Lula and Trump forced the current U.S. president, Joe Biden, to take a position. In an interview with NBC, Biden was direct. "President, Lula is an important partner of the United States. Mr. Trump's comments are personal opinions and do not represent our government. It was an attempt to put out the diplomatic fire. The comment was well received in Brasilia, but it sparked a new political crisis within the Republican Party." Trump responded with a direct attack on Biden, accusing him of licking the boots of Latin American socialists. The polarization in the U.S. was escalating. In Brazil, Biden's statement further strengthened Lula's international image. Analysts saw this episode as the consolidation of a new moment in Brazilian diplomacy, more articulated, more respected, and with the ability to respond to attacks with serenity and institutional strength. But Trump would not give up easily. His supporters were preparing for a mega-political event in the U.S., and rumors indicated there would be new attacks on Brazil and Lula. The ideological war was far from over. Amid the turmoil, an unexpected group of independent filmmakers announced the release of a documentary titled A Confrontation, Lula versus Trump, with exclusive behind-the-scenes footage of the summit. The project had been kept secret and included unreleased clips from diplomatic meetings and tense dialogues. The preview of the film, published on YouTube, had millions of views within hours. The trailer showed images of Lula walking with European leaders while Trump gestured angrily with his team. The narration said, "When egos collide, the planet trembles." Lula was informed of the documentary, but chose not to comment publicly. Trump, however, threatened to sue the producers. "Another farce from the global left," he wrote. But the damage was already done. The film highlighted the confrontation and fueled even more global debate. The premiere would be in Berlin, and various journalists were invited. It was another chapter of the dispute, now in the realm of cultural narrative and historical memory. Trump didn't stay quiet. Days after the documentary announcement, he released his own video, produced by his media team, titled The Truth, about Lula, with edited images, out-of-context phrases, and alarmist narration. The video accused the Brazilian president of being the face of corruption and the climate lie. The video went viral among far-right supporters worldwide. In Brazil, opposition politicians shared it massively. Misinformation spread, and the government had to act. The Social Communications Secretariat launched an official campaign with data and explanations about environmental policies and diplomatic actions. But Lula didn't engage in the fight. In a speech to university students, he simply said, "You don't fight lies with shouting. You fight them with patience, truth, and persistence." The statement was interpreted as a direct message and a clear strategy of not giving a stage to Trump's rhetoric. The war of narratives continued, and the next battle would be symbolic and definitive. Without warning, Lula was announced as one of the nominees for the Nobel Peace Prize for his environmental advocacy and international cooperation during the climate summit. The nomination didn't mean victory, but it was a significant acknowledgement. The news hit like a bombshell in the political landscape. Government lawmakers celebrated. In the U.S., Trump reacted violently to the announcement, claiming the nomination was political correctness run amok. The tension between the two leaders showed no signs of abating. Perguntar a ChatGPT.